Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper, where lost truths, ancient mysteries, and forbidden history collide. Let's question the past and uncover what was never meant to be found. In the mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan, archaeologists found a village unlike any other. Its walls contain thousands of clay cylinders, revealing an 8,000-year-old secret. This was one of the world's first industrial-scale beekeeping operations. In the rugged, imposing landscape of the Zagros Mountains in what is now Iraqi Kurdistan, history lies thick upon the ground. This mountainous region, a dramatic sweep of folded rock and fertile valleys, is a landscape that has witnessed the very dawn of human civilization. It was here, in the highlands overlooking the plains of Mesopotamia, that humanity first transitioned from a nomadic hunter-gatherer existence to a settled agricultural life. It was here that wheat and barley were first domesticated, that sheep and goats were first herded, and that the first small villages grew into the world's first cities. The Zagros Range is in every sense a foundational place, a cradle of civilization whose ancient mounds or tells hold the secrets of our species' earliest innovations. Yet, even in a region so rich with archaeological significance, a recent discovery has managed to stand out as utterly unique. Near the modern village of Alauri, a team of archaeologists, excavating what they initially believed to be a typical ancient agricultural settlement, stumbled upon a mystery that would rewrite a small but significant chapter of our ancient past. They uncovered a village whose very architecture was designed around a single, obsessive purpose, revealing one of the world's first and largest industrial-scale beekeeping operations, a beehive village that thrived for millennia. The site of Alauri at first glance is entirely unassuming. It presents itself as a low, sprawling mound, typical of the thousands of ancient settlement sites that dot the landscape of the Middle East. It is situated in a strategically advantageous position, nestled in a mountain valley that provides access to water, defensible terrain, and varied ecological zones suitable for both farming and pastoralism. The initial surveys and excavations reinforced this conventional interpretation. Archaeologists unearthed the familiar markers of a long-occupied agricultural community. The stone foundations of multi-roomed buildings, layers of ash from ancient hearths, shards of simple utilitarian pottery used for cooking and storage, and the fossilized bones of domesticated animals like sheep, goats, and cattle. The evidence pointed to a community that had occupied this spot for an immense period of time, with layers of settlement stretching from the late Neolithic period, through the Chalcolithic, and into the Bronze Age, a span of several thousand years. Based on these initial findings, the story of Alauri seemed to be a familiar, only successful, long-lived farming village, another piece in the vast and well-understood puzzle of early civilization in the Zagros. But as the excavations deepened, a strange and puzzling anomaly began to emerge, an architectural feature that had no known parallel in the archaeology of the region. The mystery lay within the very walls of the ancient buildings. As the archaeologists carefully cleared away the earth and rubble, they discovered that the thick mud brick and stone walls of the structures were not solid. Instead, they were honeycombed with thousands of baked clay, or terracotta cylinders. These objects were remarkably uniform in size and shape, roughly cylindrical and comparable to a modern wine bottle, with an opening at one end and a sealed base at the other. They were embedded horizontally within the walls, stacked in neat rows, often several layers deep. Their sheer number was astonishing. In a single excavated section of a building, hundreds of these cylinders could be found, suggesting that the complete, unexcavated village contained many thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands of them. The initial purpose of these cylinders was a complete and baffling mystery. They were not structural elements. The walls were perfectly stable without them. They were not pipes for water or drainage, as they were sealed at one end and not connected to any larger system. They were not a form of storage for grain or liquids, as their horizontal placement and small openings made them impractical for such a use. The archaeological team was confronted with a feature that defied all conventional explanations. This was not a decorative element. The cylinders were too numerous and too plainly made for that. It was clearly a functional part of the buildings, a technology that was central to the life of the village, yet its purpose was entirely unknown. Hypotheses were proposed and discarded. Could they be nesting sites for birds like pigeons? Unlikely given the enclosed shape. Could they be some form of symbolic or ritualistic object? Possible, but their industrial scale and integration into every building seemed to suggest a more practical economic purpose. The mystery of the puzzling cylinders became the central question of the Alauri excavation. The village was clearly not just a standard agricultural settlement. It was something else, something specialized and unique, and the key to understanding its identity was locked inside these enigmatic terracotta tubes. The breakthrough in the mystery of Alauri came not from the trowel and brush of the archaeologist, but from the sterile high-tech environment of the laboratory. To determine the function of the cylinders, the researchers needed to know what they had once contained. Even after thousands of years, microscopic residues can remain trapped in the porous surface of fired clay, providing a chemical fingerprint of the vessel's original contents. The team carefully selected a number of well-preserved cylinder fragments and subjected them to a sophisticated process of chemical analysis known as gas chromatography mass spectrometry, GCMS. This technique allows scientists to separate, identify, and quantify the individual organic molecules present in a sample. They were searching for specific biomarkers, chemical signatures that are unique to certain substances. The results from the lab were not just interesting. They were transformative. The analysis came back with a clear and undeniable positive result for a complex suite of lipids and chemical compounds that are the characteristic signature of beeswax. The cylinders had also contained traces of propolis, the resinous mixture that honeybees produced to seal their hives. Suddenly, the entire mystery of the village was solved. The thousands of puzzling cylinders were not for water, grain, or ritual. They were man-made beehives. The village of Alauri was not just a farming community that happened to keep a few bees. It was a massive vertically integrated apiary, a beehive village, where the production of honey and beeswax was not a supplemental activity, but the central organizing principle of the entire economy. The walls of the houses were, in fact, giant living apiaries. This revelation recast the entire site in a new light. Every architectural feature, every artifact, was now seen through the lens of this singular, specialized industry. The location of the village, once seen as merely good for farming, was now understood as a prime location for apiculture, with its access to diverse floral resources across different mountain elevations. The very structure of the buildings was a form of brilliant, space-saving technology, integrating the apiary directly into the living space of the community. The scale of the operation was breathtaking. This was not hobbyist beekeeping. This was an industrial enterprise, dating back to at least 6000 BC. The discovery at Alauri pushed back the timeline for large-scale, organized beekeeping by millennia, placing its origins right here, in the heart of the cradle of civilization. The village's name, Alauri, took on a new poetic resonance. The modern name was just a geographical marker, but the archaeologists began to refer to the site as the Mountain of Honey, a title that captured the essence of its ancient identity. This was a community that had dedicated itself, for thousands of years, to a unique partnership with one of nature's most remarkable insects. The chemical clue had not just solved a small archaeological puzzle. It had unearthed a lost industry and revealed the existence of a specialized society whose wealth and identity were built, quite literally, on a foundation of honey and wax. The unassuming mound in the Zagros Mountains was now recognized as a site of global significance, a place that offered a unique window into the deep history of the complex and vital relationship between humans and honeybees. The discovery that the village of Alauri was, in essence, a massive vertically integrated apiary, solved the initial mystery of the puzzling clay cylinders. However, it simultaneously opened up a new and far more fascinating set of questions. It is one thing to know what a society was doing, but it is another entirely to understand how they did it, and why it was so important. The remains at Alauri do not speak of a quaint, pastoral hobby, but of a sophisticated and long-lived industry, an engine of production that was meticulously designed, economically vital, and sustained for thousands of years. To unravel the story of this ancient enterprise is to explore a remarkable system of technology, a diversified portfolio of essential products, and the economic powerhouse that this mountain of honey became in the ancient world. The genius of the Alauri beekeeping industry begins with its core technology, the horizontal hive, ingeniously realized in the form of the terracotta cylinders. This design, while seemingly simple, represents a profound cognitive leap in the human relationship with bees, marking the crucial transition from bee hunting to true apiculture, or beekeeping. Bee hunting, a practice as old as humanity itself, involves the often destructive raiding of wild colonies found in hollow trees or rock crevices. This method, while yielding an immediate reward of honey and wax, typically results in the death of the colony, forcing the hunter to constantly seek out new wild hives. The system at Alauri was fundamentally different. It was designed not for a one-time harvest, but for a sustainable long-term partnership with the bee colonies. Each clay cylinder embedded in the walls of the village's buildings was a carefully engineered piece of technology. Fired for durability, its cylindrical shape mimicked the natural, enclosed cavities that bees instinctively seek for their nests. The hive had two key openings. The first was a small hole on the exterior of the building wall, just large enough for bees to pass through. This entrance allowed the colony to forage freely in the surrounding landscape, collecting nectar, pollen, and water, while still providing a defensible entryway against predators like wasps or hornets. The second opening was on the interior side of the wall, inside the human dwelling. This end of the cylinder was not permanently sealed, but was likely closed with a removable plug, perhaps a flat stone or a large clay stopper. This dual-access design was the secret to the system's ingenuity and sustainability. A newly established bee colony would enter from the outside and begin to build their wax comb, suspending it from the upper surface of the cylinder. As all beekeepers know, a colony organizes its hive with a specific, predictable logic. The queen, the heart of the colony, will typically lay her eggs in the comb located near the entrance. This area, known as the brood chamber, is where the new generation of bees is raised. It is the most vital and sensitive part of the hive. The bees then store their surplus resources, pollen, and most importantly, honing the comb built further back from the entrance, deeper inside the cylinder. The beekeepers of Alauri clearly understood this fundamental aspect of bee biology. Their method of harvesting was a masterclass in non-destructive management. Instead of disturbing the colony from the front entrance, which would agitate the bees and endanger the precious brood chamber, the Alauri beekeeper would work from the safety and convenience of their own home. They would gently remove the stopper from the interior end of the cylinder, likely using a small amount of smoke from a smoldering torch to calm the bees, a technique that has been used for millennia. This gave them direct access to the rear portion of the hive, the area dedicated exclusively to honey storage. They could then carefully cut away the honey-laden combs, leaving the vital brood nest at the front of the hive completely intact. The queen could continue laying, the nurse bees could continue tending to the young, and the colony as a whole would survive the harvest, free to replenish its stores and continue producing for the next season. This was the essence of true beekeeping. A system that allowed for a regular harvest of surplus resources without destroying the means of production. It was a sustainable, symbiotic relationship, codified in the very architecture of their homes. This design also offered immense practical benefits, providing safety for the beekeeper, insulation for the bees against the mountain climate's extremes of heat and cold, and an incredible efficiency of space in a terrain where flat, buildable land was at a premium. While honey is the most obvious product of beekeeping, to view the allowery industry as solely a honey-producing enterprise would be to fundamentally misunderstand its economic importance. The chemical analysis of the cylinders revealed the presence of beeswax, and it is this second, less glamorous product that may have been the true industrial cornerstone of the village's economy. In the ancient world, a world without petroleum products, synthetic polymers, or refined sugar, the dual products of the beehive were foundational materials, essential to nearly every aspect of daily life, technology, and culture. Honey, of course, was a substance of immense value. In a world before the cultivation of sugarcane or sugar beets, honey was the primary, and often only source of concentrated sweetness. It was a luxury food item, a vital ingredient in cooking and baking, and was used to make fermented beverages like mead. But its value extended far beyond its taste. Honey is a powerful natural preservative. Its high sugar concentration and low water activity create an environment where bacteria cannot grow. The ancient inhabitants would have used it to preserve fruits and possibly even small pieces of meat, a crucial technology for food storage in a pre-refrigeration era. Furthermore, the empirical medicinal properties of honey were well known. Its natural antibacterial qualities made it an effective dressing for wounds, burns, and sores, helping to prevent infection. It was used as a base for medicinal syrups and potions, and was a key component in the pharmacopoeia of ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian medicine. Honey was food, medicine, and luxury all in one, a substance seen as a gift from the gods, used in religious libations and sacred ceremonies. Despite the manifold uses of honey, it was the industrial applications of beeswax that likely made allowery a site of such strategic importance. Beeswax, the substance secreted by worker bees to construct the intricate architecture of their honeycomb, is a remarkable natural polymer. It is malleable when warmed, solid and durable when cooled, water-resistant, and burns cleanly. These properties made it one of the most versatile and indispensable raw materials of antiquity. Its most basic use was as a sealant and waterproof agent. Porous ceramic pots, which would otherwise leak, could be made waterproof by coating their interiors with beeswax. Ropes and rigging for boats could be protected from rot, and leather and textiles could be made water-resistant. More significantly, beeswax was a critical component in the technological revolution that defined the Chalcolithic and Bronze Ages: metallurgy. The primary technique for creating complex, three-dimensional metal objects, from intricate religious figurines and personal ornaments to the socketed axeheads and spear points that equipped ancient armies, was the ciré perdu, or lost wax casting method. This sophisticated process began with an artist or craftsman sculpting a precise model of the desired object out of beeswax. This wax model was then carefully coated in layers of fine clay, forming a mold. The mold was fired, which had two effects. It hardened the clay into a durable ceramic shell, and it melted the beeswax, which would run out through vents left in the mold, leaving a perfect hollow cavity in its place, hence lost wax. Molten metal, such as bronze or copper, was then poured into this cavity. Once the metal cooled and solidified, the clay mold was broken away to reveal a solid metal replica of the original wax sculpture. This technique was the ancient equivalent of 3D printing. It was the only way to create complex, detailed metal forms. An entire civilization's ability to produce advanced tools, weapons, and art was therefore directly dependent on a large and steady supply of high-quality beeswax. Allowery, with its thousands of hives, was not just a food producer. It was a critical supplier for the foundries and workshops of the burgeoning cities in the lowlands. It was producing a key strategic material for the Bronze Age. The uses of beeswax did not end there. It was used to create the world's first reusable writing surfaces, wax tablets, which were wooden boards with a recessed area filled with colored beeswax, upon which one could write with the stylus and then smooth over to erase. It was a superior source of light, as beeswax candles burned far more cleanly and brightly, with less smoke and odor, than the common tallow, animal fat, candles. It was also a key ingredient in cosmetics, ointments, and medicinal salves, acting as a binding and stabilizing agent. Beeswax was, in short, a foundational substance for ancient technology, art, and daily life. The industry at Alauri was therefore a dual-product enterprise, producing a high-value foodstuff in the form of honey and an essential strategic industrial material in the form of beeswax. The sheer scale of the operation at Alauri, as evidenced by the thousands of hives integrated into the village's architecture, strongly implies that this was an economy built on surplus. A small mountain community could not possibly consume the vast quantities of honey and beeswax that such an operation would produce. The logical conclusion is that Alauri was a major production center engaged in extensive trade. The name coined by its modern researchers, the Mountain of Honey, was likely an accurate reflection of its economic identity and output. The village functioned as a specialized industrial zone, perfectly positioned to trade its unique products with the emerging civilizations on the Great Mesopotamian Plain. This trade would have been based on the classic economic principle of regional specialization. The mountainous terrain of the Zagros, while ideal for apiculture with its diverse and abundant flora, was less suited for the large-scale, intensive cereal agriculture that was being perfected in the fertile river valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates. Conversely, the lowland cities, while capable of producing enormous surpluses of grain, lacked the specific ecological resources to produce honey and beeswax on an industrial scale. This created a natural and mutually beneficial trading relationship. Alauri would have exported its high-value, relatively low-weight products, jars of honey and cakes of purified beeswax down from the mountains. This trade would have flowed along ancient pathways, carried by pack animals like donkeys, to the markets of cities like Nineveh, Uruk, or later Babylon. In exchange for their precious bee products, the people of Alauri would have imported the goods they could not efficiently produce themselves. Chief among these would have been grain. While they likely practiced some subsistence farming, importing grain from the lowlands would have freed up their labor and land to focus on their more profitable and specialized beekeeping industry. They would also have traded for other manufactured goods, high-quality pottery from the urban workshops, woven textiles, and perhaps even luxury items and metal tools, ironically made using the very beeswax they had supplied. Alauri, therefore, should not be seen as an isolated mountain village, but as a vital and integrated part of a larger regional economy. It was a specialized production hub, a wealthy and powerful community whose control over a strategic resource gave it a significant position in the network of civilizations that defined the cradle of civilization. The hum of its thousands of beehives was the sound of an ancient and prosperous industry, an engine of commerce that connected the rugged mountains to the sprawling cities, and whose influence was felt in every workshop, temple, and kitchen that depended on the sweet and essential gifts of the honey bee. The extraordinary longevity of the beehive village at Alauri, which thrived for thousands of years, was not an accident. Its success was rooted in a deep, intuitive understanding of its environment and a remarkably sustainable relationship with the natural world. This was not a society that imposed its will upon the landscape through brute force, but one that cleverly adapted its technology and its way of life to the unique opportunities and constraints of its mountain home. The people of Alauri flourished because they established a true symbiotic relationship with their surroundings, a delicate balance between human ingenuity and ecological wisdom. The story of their endurance and their eventual decline is a powerful millennia-old lesson in the importance of environmental adaptation and the ultimate vulnerability of even the most specialized societies to long-term climate change. The Zagros Mountains provided the perfect natural laboratory for an enterprise like Alauri. The region's dramatic topography, with its deep valleys and high peaks, created a multitude of distinct microclimates and ecological niches. This vertical zonation was the key to the village's success. As the seasons changed, the flowering of plants would move up and down the mountainsides. In the spring, the lower valley floors would burst into bloom, providing the first rich sources of nectar and pollen for the bee colonies emerging from winter. As summer progressed and the lowlands became drier, the bees could forage at progressively higher altitudes, following the wave of blossoms up the slopes into the cooler, moister alpine meadows. This created a long and incredibly diverse flowering season, a natural staggered buffet that ensured the bees had a continuous and varied supply of food throughout the year. A diverse diet is crucial for the health and productivity of a bee colony, and the Zagros landscape provided this in abundance. The people of Alauri did not need to plant specific crops for their bees. The entire mountain was their pasture. The architectural design of the village was itself a brilliant adaptation to the landscape. In the rugged, steep terrain of the mountains, flat, stable ground suitable for building is a scarce and valuable resource. By integrating their thousands of hives directly into the walls of their homes, the inhabitants of Alauri developed a space-saving technology of immense efficiency. This vertical integration meant that they did not need to clear separate, flat areas of land to set up a traditional apiary. Their homes and their means of production occupied the same footprint, a crucial advantage in a confined mountain valley. This design also provided a passive form of climate control for the bee colonies. The thick mud brick and stone walls would have acted as a natural insulator, protecting the bees from the scorching heat of the summer sun and the biting cold of the winter winds. This thermal stability would have reduced stress on the colonies, allowing them to devote more energy to raising brood and producing surplus honey, thereby increasing the overall productivity of the entire village. The archaeological record at Alauri speaks volumes about the sustainability of this relationship. The site shows evidence of continuous, uninterrupted occupation for several millennia, from the late Neolithic period around 6000 BC, all the way through the Chalcolithic and into the Bronze Age. This is the signature of a stable, successful society living in equilibrium with its environment. This was not a boom-and-bust economy based on resource depletion. A beekeeping industry of this scale could only be sustained if the beekeepers were not just exploiting their bees, but actively managing them with skill and foresight. They would have understood the intricate life cycle of the honey bee, knowing when and how to split strong colonies to create new ones, and how to protect their hives from pests and predators. Their success depended on maintaining the long-term health of their bee populations. Furthermore, this long coexistence implies a deep understanding of the local ecosystem. The beekeepers of Alauri would have been expert botanists, with an intimate knowledge of which plants produced the best nectar, when they bloomed, and how their abundance was affected by rainfall and temperature. Their relationship with the environment was not one of extraction, but of stewardship. By managing their bees, they were also helping to manage the health of the plant life around them. As pollinators, the bees played a crucial role in the reproduction of the very flora upon which they, and the local ecosystem, depended. This created a positive feedback loop. Healthy bees led to healthy plant life, which in turn supported more healthy bees. Alauri was not just a village. It was the human component of a thriving, co-evolved ecosystem. However, even the most well-adapted and sustainable systems are vulnerable to large-scale environmental shifts. The final archaeological layers at Alauri tell a different story, one of decline and eventual abandonment. The evidence for the massive, industrial-scale beekeeping operation begins to thin out. Fewer hives appear to be in use, and the overall size of the settlement seems to shrink. This decline coincides with compelling evidence from regional paleoclimatology. Analysis of ancient pollen records from lake sediments and soil cores across the region indicates that, towards the end of the site's occupation, the Zagros Mountains experienced a significant period of aridification, a long-term climatic shift towards hotter, drier conditions. This extended drought would have been catastrophic for the specialized economy of Alauri. Reduced rainfall would have devastated the local flora, causing a widespread failure of the flowering plants that were the foundation of their entire industry. With their primary food source gone, the bee colonies would have collapsed, unable to produce the surplus honey and beeswax that the village depended on. The very specialization that had been the source of Alauri's strength for millennia became its fatal weakness. The village's symbiotic relationship with its environment was broken not by human mismanagement, but by a force of nature beyond its control. The mountain of honey had run dry, providing a stark, ancient lesson that even the most innovative and sustainable human societies are ultimately dependent on the stability of the climate and the health of the environment they inhabit. Alauri reveals an ancient wisdom in living with nature, not just upon it. The village's rise and fall, written in clay and beeswax, is a thousands of years old story about innovation, sustainability, and our ultimate dependence on a fragile environment. Thanks for exploring with Ancient Relics Keeper. Stay curious, question everything, and remember the truth is often buried deeper than we think.